going to get started. Thanks for coming for the closing keynote session for our Tech Day event. Our next presenter is John Callahan. John is Data and AI Solution Specialist at Microsoft. John has extensive experience with breadth of platform offerings, including data integration, data quality, data visualization, business intelligence, reporting, business analytics, and data mining. John has a drive for customer satisfaction with over 15 years of experience. He is approachable and reliable. Please join me in giving a warm Titan welcome to John.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to stand down here if you don't mind. I'm a bit of a wanderer when I go through things. But today is about including AI and how we can begin to empower both higher education and medicine. And so just a little bit more background about myself. My name is John Callahan, and I serve in the academic and medical practice here in Microsoft Education. And so I do meet with various types of academic medical centers, higher education, and even K-12 districts. And so those are some of the experiences that I'm going to draw from as we walk through what the advent of AI is doing for education today. But before we look at specifically education, let's take a look at what AI is doing in the industry in general. And so what we're looking at is over 300 million full-time jobs worldwide could be impacted by generative AI alone. I'm not going to read out every aspect of this, but 80% of the US workforce could have about 10% of their jobs replaced through AI technology and generative AI. One of the ones I'll jump down to here, generative AI could automate 60 to 70% of typical workers' day, altering a significant portion of how people spend their time in their working hours. And I will say, these technologies, even for me at Microsoft, I can see how my job and role can begin to be automated. Because that's essentially what AI is. Let's take something that's very repeatable and figure out a way to automate that. If we just use self-driving cars as an example, something that's a very repetitive task, let's find what that task is and see how often we can use AI in order to do those very repetitive tasks. So during the presentation today, I want you to think about in your role, don't get scared. I'm not getting scared of my role. Don't get scared because it's going to provide you more opportunities. But think about things that are very repetitive or observations that you make that are very repetitive in your role as a student, as a faculty, as a staff member, whatever the case might be. And those are going to be the fun use cases that you can begin to work on. But the reality is it's here and it's happening. So what we have here is kind of a smattering of different industries and how AI can impact them. In healthcare, there's things that you see on the slide, but then there's things that I'm already starting to interact with that I will also share. So yes, there's details here, but let me talk about healthcare examples for electronic health records or electronic medical records. So anytime you go to the doctor, anytime you go to the hospital, it's capturing that interaction through data, right? So electronic medical record. And think about the history of all those notes. And so in an example that I'm working with an academic medical center or AMC, is how they can use generative chat to summarize all clinical history for a particular patient before a provider meets again with that patient. So they get a quick rundown of everything. Now, when I was talking to a medical center last week, they organically said, looking at this technology, and you'll find I jump all over the place, but when they were looking at this technology, they said, this is going to bring joy back to the practice. I'm not a provider. I'm not a doctor. I didn't know that they were losing the joy. They said we spend 5 minutes with a patient, 15 minutes typing into the notes everything that we did. And so we're going to take the screens away and allow AI to be able to take those repetitive tasks. So that's just one quick example in healthcare, and many others across that we can get into. Automotive, We already mentioned self-driving cars, but it's even more than that. It's all the IoT sensors on a vehicle. The insurance, and it's even called InsurTech, they're wanting to be able to take a look at all of that data in order to better provide service. So think of OnStar 20 years ago. We've just now leapfrogged into another era of that. So many different industries. But what about you? What about you and your role? So this is where Microsoft is coming into play, not just from the macro level of industry, but how we can help you in your productivity. And so now we have what are called Copilot tools. I'm only going to show a quick video of Microsoft 365 Copilot, but these generative AI capabilities are available even in other products, and we'll get to that. So let me show you a quick example of how we're using AI in our products. All right, that's Microsoft 365 Copilot coming very soon. So let me ask you, and when I ask a question, I'll try to listen and then repeat it back so everybody can hear. Of some of the things you saw there, how do you think this could help you in your role based off of a few of the things that you saw there? Don't be shy. Excuse me? Email management. That's one of my favorites so far. As a Microsoft employee, I already have access to that. Think about one of those email threads that go about 10, 12, 15 exchanges long. Copilot automatically just summarizes that for me. I don't have to sift through all the headers anymore. It just summarizes all for me. And if there's action items in there, it automatically picks it up using AI to determine, predicting the words that are in the email, determining what's an action item or what needs to be there. So email management is a big one, and I'm really enjoying that one. Any other thoughts? Yes? Preparing for a meeting? Absolutely. Generating some ideas. I saw another hand.
I like the analyzing survey data in Excel and then create me the slides and the graphs that go with it.
Analyzing the survey data in Excel and then create the slides. This is, yes, sir. Prepare me for a class discussion. Very good. These are use cases for AI. Let me also tell you a little anecdotal story, and that's what I'm mostly going to share with you today, are small anecdotes. I have a Microsoft coworker, one of the most professional coworkers I have. She told me, John, I now spend 2 or 3 days before AI sitting on emails. I didn't know she had anxiety. I didn't realize that it took her that long to write a message, to proofread it, to sift over it. 2 to 3 days. Now with generative AI, she uses prompts to prompt the email and send it out right away. Her productivity has skyrocketed. I didn't know. She was, again, one of the most professional coworkers I have. Had no idea. So you think about inclusivity. How was my coworker already able to gain and realize a new level of productivity. So just one quick example. One of the other aspects of this is I don't want to have to learn the formulas in Excel. So as she said just a few minutes ago, just do it for me, because I want to spend less time trying to figure out if I have the syntax right and more time seeing what the answer is that I want to work on. All right. So let's talk about the foundations that are going to be backing M365 Copilot and the other technology that's out there. So we know it's here. All the press we probably saw in the first 6 months of this year. And there's so many different kinds of ways it's being used. I want to ask you, how have you kicked the tires on OpenAI.com? Any examples of how you've used OpenAI.com? Or dare I even say Bing? Yes, Microsoft has a search engine, Bing, and now we have ChatGPT behind it. Yes?
I use Bing AI to help me write quiz questions, prep course materials, think of interesting openings.
Quiz questions, course material generation, interesting openings. Thank you.
I'm doing my psychoforensics. I need a format to do anything like writing a report, writing a survey.
So formatting for your surveys and reports and things. I saw a couple other hands. Yes, sir. To outline your papers, to give you a quick outline. Yes.
I use it especially for translating more technical vocabulary or something I've written that maybe was a little too technical to a more approachable format, but I find that bar has really became that.
So simplifying technical material, even something you may have written, because it sounds like you want to be able to communicate that a little bit better. Yeah, these are all great examples. The reason why I ask y'all is because I learn from y'all. The capabilities are so wide. Yes, sir, another example.
In the bookstore, we use NetSuite, and it's got this funky language. We told it to do it. It drafted code that works.
So talking about using NetSuite and drafting code.
It wrote code that we don't know the language. It wrote the code, and the code works.
It wrote language for a code they didn't even know. I was in another California site presenting last week, and that was a similar use case, was they had this old .NET code, and they needed to update it. I'm not a coder myself, so I don't know necessarily all the ins and outs, but they needed to update it. They ran it through ChatGPT. It analyzed the old code, showed them where to update it. Think about the consulting dollars that were saved in that. Yes, I'm from Microsoft. I want you to use our consulting, but maybe for something else, right? And so instead of these kind of tasks. Thank you for those examples, because this is how we'll all continue to learn of how to use these new capabilities. All right, so let's go through, I'm sure you've had different aspects of this today. Well, let's talk about a brief history and what AI is. AI is basically computer techniques to try to automate different tasks, different human tasks. And large language models, again, the foundation of everything pretty much that I'll talk about today, so I want to go over that, is large language models on large amounts of data that can perform a variety of language tasks, including text, summarization, generation, categorization. And so the way we use these models, it can be what's called multimodal. Voice, text, it can analyze data. So different modes of giving it input and then also asking for different output as well. So those are large language models. Again, I'm also not a researcher, so I'm sure a few of you in here might have better definitions, but that's how I, John, simplify it a little bit for myself. All right, so the history a little bit more. AI started to come into form in the 40s and 50s. And then machine learning, a type of statistical analysis, which is a subset of AI. Then we go into deep learning, and we see it took about 40, 50, 60 years for this leap to come for deep learning. And then on top of deep learning is generative AI. And the reason why it took so long to get to generative AI is the compute power. It just didn't exist, or it didn't exist efficiently enough in order to be able to solve some of these things that we've already talked about here today. So if you go to Bing, and I know I said this a few minutes ago, but if you go to Bing Yes, Microsoft does have a search engine, but there's a chat feature, and it's backed by ChatGPT 4. So you have the latest model available to you in Bing. Anytime you ask it a question, it's lighting up a lot of hardware on the back end. There's a lot of compute power. It's over a couple 100 billion data points. And in order to provide you those questions and answers that y'all were just talking about a few minutes ago. So while it took several decades, now we have it. But the crazy thing is we're in the brick phone era of it. This is the first release, and it's an exciting time. I'm not going to really go through, there's many different types of AI, but I'm just going to stay focused on what the ChatGPT or generative AI can do. So I've already talked about it a little bit. So content and image generation. Number 2, summarization. Talked a lot about that so far. Code generation, already heard a couple of examples of that. And then advanced search. So one of the things we haven't necessarily touched on so much is image generation. Just quick raise of hand, has anybody created an image on OpenAI.com? Anything that you'd like to share, any kind of cool image that you've generated that you'd like to share? Use Dolly? Ah, for your, what about the music? For the music? Oh, that's really cool. Another quick example, how you use image generation? Yes, sir. So you were actually trying to tutor, I'm going to use words here, you were trying to help somebody understand something or tutor and said, create an image to help picture this, visualize that. Perfect example. And again, one of my anecdotes, I'm working with a school of medicine in Texas, and I'll tell a couple different components of it. Number 1 is they needed to take 12-week courses, and they needed to come down to 7 weeks. It's a nursing program. But they also still needed to adhere to nursing standards. Again, I'm not an expert in every single field, so if I get a few things mixed up, please forgive me. But they called it the essentials. That was their curriculum document, basically. So they needed to go from 12 weeks to 7 weeks and adhere to a certain set of curriculum standards for nursing. Using ChatGPT, able to take that same content and outline, adhere to those standards, and create a 7-week course. We'll see an example of that in just a second. The reason why the image example that they were talking about here was about how to also do a digital tutor. So School of Nursing, and within 10 minutes, one of my technical specialists was able to show a quick demo of pulling their data into an interface in the syllabus, and it was talking about a section on white blood cells. Again, not a doctor, so forgive me. But be able to ask questions about white blood cells and then visualize an unhealthy white blood cell with this disorder. So able to go and generate that model of something on the fly. Think of yourself if you're trying to tutor, like they were talking about, or as a faculty member of how you can quickly visualize things that you need to be able to help share with others. So content and image generation is very key. All right, so I'm going to go through the fine print here because I think we've touched on a couple of quick examples. So let's talk about the partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI. So Microsoft has made a significant investment in OpenAI. They're 49% shareholders, if you will, in OpenAI, and so that's where we have created a partnership with them. So with that, we're able to provide the supercomputing that is necessary to create these multi-billion data point models so that we could take advantage of those. With that in mind, we also can provide those models for you. So when you're using Bing Chat, when you get the chance to use Microsoft 365 Copilot or GitHub Copilot or some of these other modules, it is using OpenAI services. All right, so what is available in this service? So some of the earlier models, GPT 3.5, ChatGPT, those were the predecessors to what we are using today, which is the most current model of GPT-4. We've already talked a little bit about Codex when we had the coding example. And then DALL-E is the model that creates and generates images and pictures. I'm not as familiar with DALL-E. That's something I'm going to have to start kicking the tires on myself. But these are the different models that are available when you're using the Microsoft Azure OpenAI service. One of the things, though, to keep in mind is this is just one new service with lots of capabilities, but there are many different AI services that have been out there for quite a while. So while today is mostly a focus on generative chat, I do want to make sure to expose you, and this would be through our cloud, Amazon's cloud, Google's cloud. They all have these AI services as well. But I'll touch on a couple of examples. One being form recognizer. Something that is very prevalent still in higher education anyway, is a lot of paper-based forms, whether they're historical or think transcripts or think other kinds of documents, even if they've already been OCR, is the ability to extract the data off of that automatically and then put that into a database of some sort or a data store. So form recognizer is a way to automate something and then truly digitize it, because in my opinion, just taking a picture of it isn't a true digitized version of that. But also think about your phone. I know my phone now, if I take a picture of something and it has text on it, I can extract the text of that, copy and paste that. And that's similar to what form recognizer can do. Another quick example is video indexer. The reason why I'm going to describe this one is because in Microsoft Teams, in our meeting environment, this is now going to be on steroids with generative AI, but let me explain video indexer. If we were videoing, I know we're streaming, I don't know if this is recording, but if we were recording this video of this presentation, it can automatically transcribe that, automatically translate that into whatever language we need to do, or translate it to. It will also pick up many of keywords that I say. And so you automatically go in there, you can just click on keywords and jump to that. We see the likes of that on our streaming video services out there today. But on steroids is with ChatGPT, is being able to summarize, being able to generate the sentiment of things that are being said, being able to also determine what is likely the predicted next aspect or next steps of a particular meeting. So these are the portfolio of AI services. All this to kind of build the groundwork for honing back into the Azure OpenAI service. All right, so something that's important to talk about, and I'm sure you've all been exposed to it, even when you've kicked the tires on it, you've already started doing prompt engineering. That's essentially the new skill. So when we think about an AI engineer, that's essentially what that engineer is going to be able to do, is being able to talk through prompt engineering. Now, I've been to more therapy than I'd like to admit in my life, and I feel like that's what prompt engineering is. Because when I have met with therapists, what do they try to do? They try to help me see my problem, interrogate my problem in a different way. And that's essentially what prompt engineering is looking at a problem statement and trying to describe what it is so you can get the right output. I know it's quite a personal example of how prompt engineering goes, but that's the closest thing that I've seen of what this new skill is. So the prompt in this quick, very simple example, write a tagline for an ice cream shop. So the response, we serve up smiles with every scoop. The thing to remember here is the response is actually a prediction output. It could be different because it's doing prediction based off of the most current data, based off of the corpus documents of the internet. Something of this simple, maybe it would stay fairly static throughout. But that is one aspect to remember about generative AI. It is predicting what is the context and what the outcome and response should be. Coding example is being able to tell it where the data is and then create a SQL query and generating data. And a very simple example of image generation is a ball of fire with vibrant colors to show the speed of innovation at our media and entertainment company. And so that's a really old slide, by the way. I'm sure it'd be even better today. But these are the basic capabilities. But you have to be able to prompt it to generate the outcome. All right, just to go a little further with that. So this is how you customize this bot. I'm just going to go ahead and call it a bot. And I'm going to give it more context. So we're going to name our service chatbot Dana, and we're telling Dana how to respond, to be responsible in those responses, to be non-controversial, because it's really about driving more business in the ice cream shop. And so every time a user were to interact with our website around this, it's always going to remember these characteristics. And so that is part of the prompt engineering that goes on when we talk about chatbots. All right, so because this ice cream shop is also based in Phoenix, it took it a little bit further. Sorry, let me go back. And said, scoops of heaven in the heart of Phoenix. I live in Phoenix, so a little bit relevant there. Question, I'm guessing today y'all been exposed to a lot of different topics around AI, prompt generation. What are some things that have stood out to you today on this topic? And this is a little bit of a summary. This is our best ChatGPT version of what your day has been like. What are some things that have stood out to you that you've learned about AI so far today? Or how to interact with AI? Okay, so one thing that stood out here is it may not be ethical, right? What do you mean by that?
You still need a human judgment after you've got to use it with judgment.
Okay, so you still have to use it with judgment. We're going to talk about some of the Microsoft principles around that. So that's one thing, thank you for bringing that out, because certainly a very important topic. What other things have you learned about interacting with AI today? Yes?
Engineering would be one part that we could still work on, because software engineers might know what to exactly put in. But for business consultants or business people might not actually know all the languages like R and Python. They might just know one language. So prompt engineering would be that one feature that fills that gap.
So again, the skills gap between R and Python and these other coding languages, allowing business users to be able to use this and fill that gap. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Kind of the diction, it really matters. So like you would have said, write a tagline. I wrote write a slogan. And it came to a completely different thing because those mean two really different things, right?
So,
It's not obvious.
so the example here is, here it says write a tagline. He mentioned write a slogan, and how the difference of that could be. The context matters, words matter, because it's almost an engine. I like to also think of it as the master librarian of the internet. And so if you ask something a little bit different not syntax, but grammatically, you might get a different answer. So thank you for sharing a couple of your experiences, because this is how we're going to continue to learn the body of the experience of how we continue to advance this. But what's also really important is around trust and governance. So when you're using the Microsoft capabilities, it's also about making sure that your data stays your data. So quick example, when you're using OpenAI.com or Bing Chat, you're putting your data out there to possibly be used by the public model. When you're using the internal services that Microsoft offers, your data stays your data. This is very, very important. Your data will not be used to fine-tune the large language model or GPT-4 or whatever the next GPT-5 will likely be, because it stays your data. And that is really, really key, is making sure that your data stays your data. Now, yes, I am talking specifically about Microsoft offerings. And so we also have an offer enterprise. This is more for the enterprise for just a second. But you can allow an internal use of Bing Chat that, again, is secure to your data here at Fullerton. So the bottom line here is, when you need to use more secure use cases, there are ways to make sure that that data does not leak out into the public domain. And so using the Microsoft Cloud can take you there. All right, so one of the topics that this gentleman raised was about ethics. So Microsoft is based off of these 6 core AI principles: privacy and security, which we just touched on ever so briefly, inclusiveness, accountability, transparency, fairness, reliability, and safety. And there are write-ups on every one of these pillars on Microsoft.com. So I won't be exhaustive here, but one of the things that's also very important is Microsoft makes sure to be very transparent. These are what the models are doing. This is how the models work. This is what we're doing with the prompts that you generate and the responses. So we are just as transparent and accountable. Again, coming back to the ethical use of that. Now, if you're using, just as a quick note, if you're using the Microsoft service, you can opt out of this. You can opt out of it, but we will be able to monitor those prompts because we want to make sure that they're being used in an ethical way. We don't want nefarious use from our services. Now, when these large language models become more prolific out in the wild, there's going to be all different kinds of uses, but Microsoft is going to make sure that the uses of our prompts and responses are going to be fair and ethical. And there's pillars around all of these. You can look a little bit further about each one of these pillars on our website. All right, let's look at, I'm going to kind of back off GPT for a second and look at AI in general. And what are the different layers of how we can likely serve education as an example. The first one is what's called using raw input. Basically, the foundation is let's go and collect a bunch of materials, images, documents around educational resources so that we can offer that up. A next level up would be data modeling and processing. So the presentation in this room just before myself was a faculty member talking about machine learning in student success. So how you can use machine learning models to predict student retention, student success within a course, student success within a particular term, and how we can make sure that they can be retained and be successful. Going a little bit further is employing deep learning techniques. So a neural network adjusting math problems difficulty based off of student performance. So being able to have almost a back and forth. As understanding what the student responses are, making it more complex so that they can continue in their learning process. Higher order cognitive services, complex language understanding, so using natural language processing, personal feedback for students. I realized I left this slide out that has what's called, it's more for K-12 education, but how students are able to, immersive reader, that's what it's called. Immersive reader is how students can go through learning exercises, read out verbally what they're seeing on the screen, and it being able to determine what parts of that phrase or paragraph needs to be honed in on, and so they can practice their skills. And so that would be an example of higher order cognitive systems. And then where we're at today, which is inspired output, generating accurate and relevant output. Now, something you might see that is a little curious in there is about hallucinations with sometimes random phrases. And the person who put this together, at first I questioned, why are we putting this in there? Why are we talking about hallucinations? Is that just a raise of hand? Have you heard of hallucinations? Okay. Hallucination is a way that it's producing what seems like a plausible output, but may actually not be factual, right? So hallucinations are part of large language models and something to definitely keep in mind in its use. And part of this is being able to help students determine what are real sources, what are not, and being able to use higher level learning with student education to be able to determine, are they looking over the resources, or are they just having it do it for them? So that was the reason why I put that in there. But again, this is where we are now today with more inspired output. All right. So I'm not going to exhaust this topic. I think we're I think we're kind of past it, to be honest with you. I would say in the first 6 months of this year, when generative chat was first out, there was a lot of hand-wringing about, oh boy, how are students going to use it? What are the ethical uses? How are students going to behave with these tools? But it's almost like saying, there's a nail. How are you going to push that nail into the table? And don't use the tool that's sitting there, which is the hammer. It is there. The tools are there. And now it's about how do we harness these tools? How do we make sure that we can use these responsibly in a way that elevates everyone's learning? And so in some discussions that I've had with higher academic institutions, has more to do with, okay, allowing the students to be the reviewers, as I started to say a few minutes ago, to be the reviewers of the content, almost as if they're grading the output. Were the sources accurate? Was it good content? Was it good grammatical output that it had generated? And so it actually can elevate the learning. It's going to take some creativity. It's going to take some thought in how we implement these tools, but the tools are here, and how we use them matters. All right. While we've looked at a couple of different examples or talked about a few today, here are just a few more that I'll touch on, the ones in bold. This is, again, part of the prompt engineering. So as a student, I might ask ChatGPT, act as a tutor. I need help understanding how the quadratic formula works. Please describe it in easy to understand terms. Another example. Come up with 10 ways to improve memory and recall while studying for my physics exams. So just different ways of being able to get into the rhythm of using this as a tool. As a teacher or an instructor, write multiple choice questions. Provide 10 multiple choice questions about the period of Reconstruction. Design and lesson activities. Generate age-appropriate explanation. Explain a lunar eclipse for an 8-year-old. And then for fun things, write lyrics. Create lyrics for a song about the founding of America. So a way to generate something on the fly that is going to be most relevant for students out there. Curious, have anything that we've talked about generated any new ideas for you? I know I've already asked you for some. Are there new ideas coming? If so, what are you excited to go back and try so far? Sorry, let me get a little closer. Voice command on ChatGPT. Thank you. Other things that you're looking forward to trying? Other ideas that you're coming up with?
See if I can teach it emotions and humor.
Okay, emotions and humor. See if you can teach it emotion and humor. Yes?
It can look in other languages that I can't. Right, so you can go read another language on top of it.
So research tool and looking at other languages that we don't understand. Go and find this content and translate it for me.
Like integrate AI into Zoom, and then when the speaker talk, like my professor talk, I do not have to take notes anymore. Just have it take notes for me, and I just read.
Okay, so instead of necessarily having to take notes in an instruction, have it take notes and summarize for you so you can pay more attention. There you go.
He said instead of having an additional way to maybe come up with research papers or analyze, come up with research papers as a result of looking at other research papers and making conclusions.
Okay, so over top of multiple research papers, come with a final conclusion over top other research papers. Thank you. These are the fun things about it, and I think as we all continue to hone these things in and listen to each other, we're going to find how powerful these tools are. I'm going to kind of skip through this a little bit, but different use cases for education. Let's just focus a little bit more on higher education today. So I talked about the nursing example a few minutes ago, from 12-week to 7 weeks, so course design, right? So that's one type of use case. Smart enrollment, being able to have a digital advisor kind of take care of some repetitive tasks. So I was working with another Cal State campus, and we were just kind of kicking the tires together in the room. One of it was, okay, what would be my course design if I wanted to complete my degree in 3.5 years using all available terms to me, including the summer? What would the course load need to look like for every term? Automatically spit that out. We were using Bing Chat. What I didn't have access to was their internal section data, because we could go a little further, help customize the sections that I want to join or want to enroll in based off of the kind of day that I want to have. I know we kind of all do that, and maybe, believe me, it's been a couple decades since I've had to do it, so it's probably different than I even know how it goes today. But being able to use not only the public data, but internal section data as well to begin to map out course design. So one of the other aspects of using in higher education is about transfer credits. In a particular state that I was working in, it was how do we take transfer credits from one institution to another, or from community college into the university system. And right now, that's a fairly manual process. What is the course outline for the credits, and does it happen to match any of the courses that we have here as an institution? ChatGPT can do that automatically, comparing documents. Does it meet the requirements for this course? Automatically taking a digital advisor to the next level, if you will. So if I'm a transfer student, I have a pretty clear understanding of what my likely credits will be at a certain institution, as an example. Any other use cases that are standing out here, either on this slide or otherwise, that you can think of?
I think the biggest thing for me is like if there's a topic or something that I didn't understand in the lecture, I can ask it, find me a resource where I can read up a different perspective of this topic, or question me to see if my knowledge is correct based on what's taught.
So a digital tutor, not quite understanding something in lecture, quiz me on something about this topic to make sure I have understanding, or go get me further resources around that. And talk about inclusiveness, and this is with another campus that I was working with in Texas, is that very thing, is the fact that, I'm middle-aged now, and it took me a lot of my life to finally get the courage to speak up in different settings and environments. But what if I could speak up to a chatbot and find out what I need to know right away? Helping me to get through, or helping some of us to get through some of those things that we have to work through sometimes as people when we don't know what we don't know. And so being able to ask ChatGPT right in the middle of class helped me to understand this topic a little bit better. Thank you. So very good. I won't spend too much time on medical research. I talked a little bit a few minutes ago about clinical notes. But there's, whatever the case might be, if I'm a learner, if I'm a faculty member, if I'm a physician, it's bringing joy back into the process, or more joy, if you will, using the tools that are out there. So let's take a look at a couple of further examples. So this is an example of a district schedule redesign. So one of my colleagues was working with a K-12 district. And before I jump more into this, I don't have the slide here, but there's a slide about analytics maturity. And the holy grail of analytics was optimization. And optimization is its own degree, its own advanced degree. And that is the holy grail, because there's a lot of levers that you have to pull in optimization. Is how many parameters are coming in, what are the thresholds of these parameters to get the best possible output. And this is where ChatGPT comes into play to really advance and allow optimization to be in the hands of everyday people like myself. Because I'm not going to get an advanced degree in optimization. So when we think about district schedule redesign, here was the initial prompt. How can we redesign the teaching and learning schedule to creatively reorganize the school day to meet the needs of staff and students? So basically, the big idea is if we can adjust the schedule, we can create more time for teachers for collaboration and for their enjoyment, basically, bringing joy back into it. And so there's different constraints and considerations that went into it. This was a live example that was being done with the district. So school information, criteria for all students, for example, the number of minutes for lunch, non-negotiables, lunch, recess, resources or specials. So again, we're telling the model what the constraints need to be, and this is part of an optimization model. But within moments, being able to create a real-world solution, a fourth grade grade schedule. Now, I coached baseball for my son at different times. I wish I would have had this, creating those lineups, because especially in the younger years, when you wanted everybody to be able to play, everybody had the same number at bats over the season. Like there's these criteria. I spent a lot of time trying to create this baseball lineup. This would have made my life so much easier. So think about that optimization task, that we don't have to have a degree, we get just to use the output of it. So if we talk about prompt decomposition, there was the original prompt, and this is a pretty powerful thing about using these models, is the ability to interact with it. Now let's revise the prompt. How can we create a fluid and flexible elementary schedule that provides teachers with time for collaboration and planning and students with personalized learning experience? So it went from kind of a teacher-centric way of saving time and collaborating, and also adding student personalized learning, and then a further prompt. As a part of that, in a brief nutshell here, these were the previous minutes and then the outcomes. So the deltas between the class schedules. I'm not going to drain this slide by any regard, but one of the things that I will show you on this next eye chart here is one of the most powerful things you can ask the model to do is ask you questions. Tell me why you thought this. Tell me why you generated this content. And it begins to reason with you. Or in this case, it began to ask yes or no questions to better refine the model. And I didn't have to think about those questions. This is consulting. This is what a lot of consulting firms do. They do this and get paid a lot of money to do this. And now we have a model to help us get there. So for example, one of the questions that the model asks, it's a question. Students are at specials when core teachers are planning, yes or no? And the model began to ask questions to better refine this particular schedule. Again, more constraints and considerations. You can get very detailed. So if things really need to be refined, you can ask the model to get more specific about that. All right, let me use a patient-centered imaging. And I have to admit, the person who created this section is also a physician. So I don't quite understand all the ins and outs, but at the same time, I think we'll all understand the outcome that was created here. So here is the opportunity, is patient-centered imaging. So think about getting an MRI. So what is the whole process, all the way from scheduling to getting a readout? So it's a complex, multi-stage, multi-system workflow, limited time for result explanations. Think about trying to go to a physician and get the explanation. Language and cultural barriers, patient disengagement. And naturally that happens because if we're not quite understanding what's happening, what's being said, we're likely going to disengage. So the innovations are a lot of things that we've talked about today. So I'm going to kind of move through fairly quickly here. So the entire journey has to do with scheduling, the consultation, the labs, tests, and imaging, and then the review and the patient communication, which in this case is the most important. So here's the prompt. I'll quickly read it out. Below is an extract from an MRI diagnostic report of a company. Extract key patient relevant information and create an easy to read and patient-friendly, non-jargon summary for the patient in English and Spanish. Include links to publicly available information regarding their condition. What you're actually seeing in the screenshot is something called Azure AI Studio. It's in our tool set, and you can drop the data in there. And out of that, out of the MRI readout, is something like this. I'm going to be very brief. There's still a jargon that's a little bit more, I wouldn't say complex, but still a little detailed. And so what we're going to ask the model to do one more time is to simply say simplify. And here is the MRI report, and here's the translated output. That is a new era. That can bring joy back to both the physician and understanding as the patient. I'm going to end on this quick example. We've talked about so many different use cases, but if we're thinking about creating content, we're asking the model, are you familiar with this particular article about, the article's entitled, Unleash Your Inner Leader, Master the Art of Healthy Narcissism. And so the prompt was, do you understand it? And the model comes back, yes, I can understand. I'm aware of this article. Here are the main findings. Great. My response is, I'm an executive coach and leadership expert. If you had to teach about this article, what would be the competencies, knowledge, skills, abilities, and learning outcomes? So one of the capabilities of generative AI is categorization. So knowing the difference between a skill or a knowledge or type of ability or learning and outcome, this is what it automatically generated. And the next thing is create basically a course outline in order to produce this. So if you think about that example that I shared a while ago, taking a 12-week course down to 7 weeks, this is how we did it in a matter of moments. It is more than just a minute, a matter of moments instead of weeks and months. And so the capabilities, and the reason why I ask you all questions all throughout, because I'm learning from you. The capabilities are very wide-ranging, and we have just started. This has only been out for less than a year. I would encourage you to go and start playing. Kick the tires. Go to Bing Chat. Yes, I'm driving you to a Microsoft web page, but it's more than that. It's figuring out how this technology works, how to learn how to be responsible with it, what prompt engineering is, but most of all, how we can better serve those around us. Because that is our charge. With more understanding, we have the opportunity to be of more service. And that is the key. And so I hope that we all enjoy this new era of AI. I'm excited because I said a while ago, we're in the brick phone era. It is the first pass of this. And so what's going to be happening over the next few years will be quite exciting. And believe me, there's lots of parts of my job that I could be worried about going away. But actually, those same things, I'll be glad to get off my plate so that we can see where we're going to go next. So thank you today. I do have some resources of just how to get started about literacy, getting your data ready, and then just different kinds of AI training and resources, and we can make those available to you afterwards. But I want to go ahead and just pause if there's any questions, anything that you'd like to ask. Yes? One more time. Copilot for public use, it's commercially becoming available here in the next few months. Not sure what the education release will be, because education usually has a lot better offerings. Yes? Yep. Was about or in medical centers. Is it just for in the clinics, or is it about also for emergency care? I think it's just a matter of time, because just being a year out, we're still just kind of looking at what are the most important use cases and how to roll those out. I imagine we'll see it all over the place. And just tangentially, I can't remember if I mentioned this one or not, but I think I did, maybe around clinical notes, but clinical note history would be different if I'm a nurse versus if I'm a doctor or if I'm an emergency medical provider. It would be different of what I would need to know in the moment or about that patient. And so that is part of that use case too, is varying the summarization of those notes. So to that question. Yes, sir. So the question is, in Copilot, can we take like a map or some kind of image and have it be accessible ready, if you will. I don't fully know the answer to that when it comes to images. The logic tells me that is part of it because it's multimodal, is being able to also interpret images. But let's put that one on hold, or if you want to make sure to follow up with me, I can get back to you on that. Any other questions? Well, I think, oh yes, one more. Uh-huh. Okay, so let me try to make sure I can distill that down as a faculty member. Marilyn, I think you said. Yes. So it's about how to better prepare students with critical thinking, not, if I'm understanding correctly, making sure that we don't allow this tool to take away that critical thinking in its application. Yeah, so, and that is going to be, I think, the initial challenge, right? Is how do we make sure that we are integrating into our curriculum how we're still challenging our students with critical thinking. I'm going to kind of open that up. If that question made sense, or we can even talk a little bit more about it offline too. But thoughts on that? Yes. So in this example, what was being shared here is, as a nurse, you're the last line of defense. And if there's something was maybe prescribed that actually was not going to work for the patient, it doesn't matter how many other steps in the workflow are there, the nurse is the final kind of call and to say, this is not a good idea. We need to go make sure that this was not a misprint. And I think what I'm hearing here is making sure that ChatGPT and these AI services are not the final step, but they're a tool in the process, but not the final step. And in this case, the student having to still show, maybe in a different kind of way, maybe in a different format than what has been traditional, but show their critical thinking in an open format. I'd be glad to talk a little bit more offline if you'd like to. Yes. So about personalized LLMs for that hospital, yes, and that exists today, and that's called Over Your Data. That's a feature we offer, which is just your data. And so if you have a corpus of documents or a corpus of handbooks or whatever the case might be, maybe we're talking about patient data, that it will only look at that data, not share it outside. Absolutely, that's available today, as you can use. And that's one thing I didn't, and thank you for bringing that up, and I'll probably be the last one here, but is these services not only for the public internet, but you can use just your data with the Azure OpenAI service and drop that in and be able to use it from there. All right, I think we are at time. Thank you all for your participation. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks for coming. Thanks for making it to the closing session. We thank John for traveling from Arizona to here for delivering our closing keynote.
We serve up scoops with every smile.
Thank you so much. This concludes our program.